Hello YouTube, Mr. Gibson Guy here. Thanks for tuning into the channel. Today I'm doing a photography video here on classic rangefinder cameras from the 1950s. And I have a couple of classic rangefinders here from the 1950s. And I'm going to compare the similarities and the differences. There's a lot of similarities between these two cameras, but several things are different about them. Just kind of minor details. So I'm gonna, I have these two here. I've had this Canon for a couple of weeks, and the Nikon just arrived yesterday. So I've been getting familiar with the controls on this, and see the carryover from one to the other. As usual in photography, we have the old Canon versus Nikon competition going on again, even back in the early 1950s, going back 70 years ago. Canon and Nikon were kind of fighting it out right from the very beginning, and that's where we get these. And these are two really fine rangefinder cameras from the 1950s. So let's take a look at similarities and differences. I just go by prices that I'm looking at today, just general, and what I paid. This Canon I bought with free shipping, and it was under $200 with the lens. That was a pretty good deal for a 70-year-old camera. Kind of verging on 75 almost now, another couple months. But so I got started with that one. Then this Nikon is, the Nikon is from originally, this S2 is from 1954. I was born in 1953, so this is 1 year younger than I am. And I'm 71, so this camera is 70. That's the price on these. The low-end price on camera with the lens, the f2 lens, is going to be around the $350 mark. Maybe some shipping tax after that, but this one tends to be more expensive. Now the next point, the Canon is based on the original Leica 3, which was designed in the early 1920s, and this classic camera design that went on for many years after World War II, when they opened up all the Axis forces patents. People started making copies of Leicas because the Leicas were so popular, and Canon, this is one of the best of the copies of the Leica 3, was the Canon 2D that this one is. And the Nikon, on the other hand, is kind of a copy of the Contax 2A, 2D, 2A. That Contax, interestingly enough, it looks like they're going for about around $300, $350. So it's a little bit lower price than what the Nikon S2 is going for, and definitely a higher price than here. So in that case, the Contax is a little bit below the Nikon. But the Leica, this I got for under $200. The Leica that this is copied from ranges anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 with a lens, or maybe without a lens. Pretty pricey. But I think the most obvious point that it brings out is, why is that Contax, which is as old as the Leica and as much, even has some features that are better than Leica, why is that so cheap? Oh, there was some shutter problems that a lot of them had. And one of the weak spots of the rangefinder camera is that the lens, I guess you should go around keeping it at f/16 all the time, or keep a cap on it, because when the sun shines into the lens on a rangefinder camera, that lens focuses all that light that's coming in from the sun directly on one little pinpoint, and it can pretty quickly burn a hole through your shutter, which means you better keep a lens cap on your rangefinder camera if you're going to have it outdoors. You can have it on a strap over your shoulder or around your neck and have the camera right in front of you, but when it doesn't have a cap on it, you're exposing the shutter to the sunlight all the time, and the lens is focusing that light, concentrating that light on the shutter, and it will burn through it. So that's just something to consider. Be careful about that. With a single lens reflex camera, it won't happen, because a single lens reflex behind the lens has a 45-degree mirror, which pops up when you take your picture and then pops back down again. And if you don't have a mirror to raise and lower, you get a shutter speed that's just the shutter, sounds like this, or like this. That's it. A regular single lens reflex camera has that mirror that pops up and then pops back down again, and it makes all kinds of noises that these rangefinder cameras don't make, because they don't have the mirror flipping up and flipping down. But the other side of that coin is that if you don't have a lens cap on, you're exposing your shutter to the sunlight, whatever lights you're around, all the time, and sunlight coming in can burn your shutter and burn a hole in it. So keep that in mind. Alright, so let me go through this one other thing. The advantage of the rangefinder cameras, as we were just discussing, they don't have a mirror box, they're not as loud, and the other thing is that without the mirror box, your lens can come way back inside the camera, right up to the shutter. At the back element of the lens can get very close to the film at the shutter when the shutter's open, and that can give you a very, very sharp picture that you're not going to be able to get out of a single lens reflex, because your mirror is, or the rear element of your lens is going to be more of a distance from the film plane itself, so it can't be as sharply focused as when the back of the lens element is right up to the shutter. So that's an advantage that rangefinder cameras supposed to have. It sounds kind of like it doesn't make sense, because you're focusing an SLR camera by focusing the actual lens that's taking the picture, and that's as sharp as it can get. Whereas with the rangefinder camera, you're turning the focus on the lens that takes the picture, but your focusing system for the rangefinder, which is based on a window here and a window here, or a window here and a window here, and the differences between the two, it sounds like, well, you're not even looking through the lens that's going to take the picture. But if everything is in registration correctly and in specification, then what you do here on turning your focus on your lens should be reflected exactly by what's going to come through here and get onto the film. Rangefinder cameras, and if you don't know how they work, this is a rangefinder, this is a viewfinder, and they're both coupled, so it's called a coupled rangefinder. And the rangefinder makes what's called a yellow patch that's in the middle of the frame, and it shows what you're looking at and how the camera sees it. And it'll look like this, and as you move it over, they all line up. And when they're lined up perfectly, that says your picture, your lens is focused, your picture is in focus for that particular distance. So when you watch these things move together, that rangefinder thing, that's what you see is a double image that becomes a single image when it's in focus. And that's how these things focus, is they do it that way with the coupled rangefinder. All right, back to our comparison. So very sharp pictures, and also since you're using a viewfinder instead of the lens, when you're taking a portrait of somebody, the photographer can see if your subject blinks during the exposure, because then you're going to get a picture of somebody with their eyes closed. And with an SLR, the viewfinder blacks out at the moment of exposure, and then the mirror flips back down and you can see, but you don't actually see with a single lens reflex the subject at the moment of exposure. With these cameras, or with a twin lens reflex, you can see your subject while the exposure is being made. I know it's a very short time, but it's actually the reason they call it a blink of an eye. It happens real fast and it ruins the picture. All right, so let's go back to our comparison. We'll finish up with this because this is getting too long here. Size and weight comparisons. Now, if I can show you this, I'm taking bottom plate to bottom plate here. I guess I could do it this way. See if you can see this. They are all exactly the same width. You couldn't get any closer than that. But on height, I better put the knife in here and the Canon here, and you can see they have several different decks on them. These are just about even, but basically the Nikon is a little bit higher up than the Canon is. So same width, little bit more height, but very close. Now let's look somewhere else. And I'm not doing this in grams, my scale is in pounds and ounces. This is the Nikon, this is weight without film. I guess I should take off the lens cap and the filter. This is funny, it's got a Minolta filter from the 1950s. All right, and Nikon comes in at 1 pound, almost 7.5 ounces. 1 pound 7. And the Canon, this thing is a tank, here we go. 1 pound and exactly 12 ounces. So 5 ounces heavier. That's enough that you will notice it a little bit. Pretty light, a little bit heavier. You can tell the difference. All right, now back to the script here. The differences now, we've seen size and weight comparisons. The Canon camera has the Leica style film loading, and how that works is you turn this key, which loosens this, and the whole bottom pops off, and then you see underneath there that's what it looks like. You have this spring mounted thing here, take up spool that's in there, and then you drop you have to put it on this spool, drop the film cartridge in here, in here, where we go, yeah, like there, drop that in, at the same time you drop the film in here, at the same time you drop the spool in here. It's kind of a complicated procedure, but it gets even better than that because this little directions here, let's see if I can see this. See this part right here in the light? This is your film clipping directions because the film actually has to be trimmed because you don't want it to go in here and to be loaded. You have to trim away some more of the film, so it has to go 11 centimeters. Good luck with that. And go on to the reel, and so then you drop it all down there together. And that's how that works. That's the old Leica style of dropping film. On the other hand, the Nikon, and this one is kind of tough too, it looks the same way. It's got one of these releases on it. And it says to open, go this way. Like that. And then you have to manage to pry this loose. Here we go. Alright. This is kind of a pain in itself, getting this off, but I have to go off camera. There. Alright, now, then you remove the base plate and the back like the Nikon F that would come after this. This is kind of the design where the Nikon F body came from, was from this rangefinder. And then you put in your film, go to the spool here, and you just wind the film on. Then, I'm not going to use, this is already a shot roll here. You have to come in here, line it all up, get it to drop in, slide everything back into place like we want it, and then we turn the key and it's loaded. So this is before they had the pop open back, but now you have more of an appreciation of the pop open back because it's so easy compared to doing things this way, dropping the base plate. Oh, that was fun, and then getting the spool of film all into it after you've clipped it. That's going to be fun, and you saw how much fun taking off the back was. But for this one, it goes on easier, but it comes off a little harder. So it's a trade-off. If this is something that's bothering you about the rangefinders, I will say that the more modern ones, like a Canon P, which is for popular, was their most popular rangefinder because it has a swing open back and it has single shutter speeds instead of dual shutter speeds, and it's a lot more modern, and they made a ton of them in the late 1950s. So you can get a Canon P with a lens for you can find them for maybe just a little over 100 or under 100 for the body. So if you want to go the easier rangefinder route, you might look for a Canon P sometime if you won't want to be quite as archaic as these. Alright, so what's on the list? Leica style film loading and Nikon style film loading. The film advance, as we saw with the Canon, it has the wind knob. You see, you turn this and it turns this in the opposite direction and moves the exposure to the next frame, and then you do it again. I'll turn this one way and watch this go the opposite direction. You see it? See that? It does opposite. That's the film wind. And then it recocks the shutter so it's ready to shoot again. Then you do it again. That's the old style wind on. Then the Nikon has a film advance lever. How advanced can that be? And you can take your exposure and then just do that all the way. And that's how you advance the film on the Nikon S2. A little bit easier. But this is kind of fun. Also, with that, they have the rewind. You have to set this little thing over here to rewind, and then you can rewind your film. Pull this out, turn that until it gets rewound. Then you put it back on advance to load film. On the Nikon, you have the same thing. You have this collar around the shutter button, and it has a little dot that lines up with an A for advance, or you lift it and twist it, and it goes to an R for rewind. And look at this. Talk about modern. This is where these first appeared, I think, from what I've seen. Look at that. Look familiar? That's how you wind film back up into your SLR at the end of the roll. And that's the same thing that you do with Nippon Kugaku Tokyo with the S2. So they're a little bit ahead of these. The Canon P for popular has the modern features. It has a wind arm. It has a pop-up twist lever for your rewind. And the other thing we're going to say is shutter speeds. Yes, because why not have two shutter speed dials? And this one does. If you can see this, here in the sunlight is your high-speed shutters, and it's 1/60th, 1/125th, 1/250th, 1/500th, and 1/1000th. Very fast shutter. And then if you set this to the red, you lift, bring it over here, the red, and line it up with the other red here. There it goes, popped into place. See red against red? You see there's another group of numbers. When you put this on the red, and that one on the red, there you can see this? It's on the red 30, then a 15, 8, 4, 2, 1, and T, which is timer. T is kind of like bulb, except the bulb setting, it works when it activates the shutter, and then it lets the shutter up when you remove your finger. The T setting is a mechanical setting. You press it and it opens the shutter and leaves it open until you twist this dial to another number. Then it will shut off the shutter, or if you start to advance your film. But it's in rewind, so it's not doing anything. So we got to put it back to A for advance. And then it winds and the shutter works like that. So, differences in the controls. The Canon similarly has the fast shutter speeds up here, and then you set it to the red, here, and it goes down to the shutter speeds here. How do I do that? No. it's got a lock on it. Anyway, it's got shutter speed, slow shutter speeds there. I'm going to do everything handheld, so I'm going to have to use the upper shutter speeds anyway. And this one doesn't have a 1,000th, it only goes to 1/500th of a second. So, the later rangefinders from Canon and Nikon went to the usual 1 shutter speed setting dial rather than 2. So the newer ones like the Canon P, you just have 1 shutter dial and it looks just like the dial on your SLR, if you had a dial on your SLR, unless it was push button. So they got more modern, more efficient, and also when they put on the pop open back on the Nikons and Canons, they made it so it resets your exposure counter, sets you back to 0 when you open the back, just like it does on an SLR. On these, you have to manually set the numbers to be to frame 1. You can see how that moves. See, you do that, and you can twist it around. There's a little notch right there, and I set the 0 on the notch. So I just reset my frame counter. It's ready to start counting frames. So a lot of different stuff here. Different, similar stuff to an SLR, but it's a whole different world. Now, viewfinder is the same thing. The viewfinder in the Canon has 3 different settings. Set it here. This one is for telephoto lens. It's supposed to be the same as like a 100mm or an 85 or something. 1x is sets the frame count, the frame in the rangefinder to be at 1 power. That's for 50mm, and then x is 1.5x. This is for a wide angle lens, and shows you, yeah. So you have 3 different views through this viewfinder. They're changed by this. I find set it on the 1x and leave it there, and that will give you the best view. The viewfinder on telephoto and wide angle is pretty pathetic. It's hard to see much of anything of it. The Nikon doesn't have that. It has a fixed viewfinder, and it's set for 50mm, but it's also very easy to use, and one of the best. That's one of the reasons that this camera was so popular, was this had about the brightest range, the brightest viewfinder view of any rangefinder cameras, no matter what company, and that made this one very popular. And it has this yellow patch rangefinder window here that goes with it, and it's very easy to see the yellow patch in the viewfinder because it's a full-size viewfinder, and it was the easiest one to work and to focus with. This Nikon also had this really weird thing where they put, you can look over this, yeah, where they put a focus control up here on the camera body, and you can see the focus is changing because you can also focus like this if you want to, but there's a problem. You might block your viewfinder window if you put your thumb up here. You have to kind of go from below, make sure you reach underneath, and then they should have put the shutter button here, but they put it here where you got to reach for it, but they got it. And then both of these have these locks when it reaches infinity, and then it keeps it. You have to do this to release it, and it stays off. That's because it's easy to remove and replace the lens if you want to do that when this thing locks up at infinity. But it's got a little lever here you can push down and move it off, or you can move this and move it off. Little knob there. So that's difference in controls. That is controlled by this on the Canon lens, and that's hooked up directly to the aperture. See, it moves there, and then it's got this little notch here. That's where it'll lock up. And now it locks the lens in place. This is a screw mount lens. I'm not going to take it off because then I got to put it back on again. And this one has this little spring release down here, and then it twists off. You start at f16. But I'm not going to do it right now because it fights with me. You got to get the hang of doing those again. Probably haven't had the lens taken off in 70 years. So that takes us through the comparison and the similarities and differences of the Canon and the Nikon, the 2D and the S2. I'll finish up with pointing this out now that I've taken you on this little tour of Rangefinder, Canon and Nikon cameras from the 1950s. And that is that I'll make this statement here. Using a classic rangefinder is very demanding, but the result is that the photographer and the camera must learn to work as one. And that's mainly going to be the photographer, because the camera's not going to learn anything. The camera forces the photographer to be on top of the entire photographic process. If you are going to take a picture with, or shoot a roll of film with one of these cameras, you have to be on top of everything you're doing if you're going to get any results. There's no light meter here. You're responsible for doing that. You have to figure out which shutter speeds you're going to use and how to get set on them, how to get the film into the camera and turning and advancing, how to focus, pick your aperture, your shutter speeds, make your exposures, and do it while you're focusing through a rangefinder, looking through not the lens, but through a viewfinder off to the side. And there's no parallax correction on this. You have to adjust for the fact that you're looking here, but taking a picture here. That's called parallax, because it sees the video, the subject from here. You're seeing the subject from here. It's a little bit different view. Now, you get to be 5 or 6 feet away, it doesn't really make any difference. But if you're getting down to 2 feet and you're trying to take a picture of something, you're going to be aiming at something different than what the camera sees. So all those parts enter into the requirements of the photographer. But the result is that the pictures that you make, you're going to feel like you really made the pictures, because those pictures are not going to happen until you make them happen. And that means you're not letting the camera do it. You're doing it all yourself. It's just the machine, and it says, all right, manipulate me into making a picture. Can you do it? It's a challenge. And to me, just the whole idea, it's kind of romantic. It's you are getting down to the very essence of photography, because you are controlling everything, and you're doing it with an ancient instrument. Let me just say, aesthetically, I love the Leica 3 look of the old rangefinder camera. And this is, if you look at a Leica compared to this Canon 2D side by side, you're going to have to read the name to know if it's a Canon or a Leica. It's so similar, and I think it looks really great. But I actually prefer, even better, the Contax look. The Contax actually was a little bit silly because it had bigger knobs here and here. It's kind of bigger and fatter, and they rose up higher, and it looked like a castle with 2 turrets on it. It looks a little bit weird, but I think, to me, the Nikon is the most aesthetic of them all. Even though I love the look of the Leica 3 as well. Both beautiful pieces of machinery and amazing photographic instruments. It's a whole different level of photography, making your photos on this, and I'm looking forward to loading up film and going out and using both of these and seeing how they work. I've checked the shutter speeds and they sound like they're pretty accurate for what they're set to. That's all you can do. This one you can't even see the shutter except taking the lens off. This one you have to take the back off or the lens off. You can get more. You can see if there's more light traveling through when the shutter moves. This one you can't. You're just guessing. You have to go by what you hear. But two really magnificent old cameras, and to me it would put you shooting these would put you much more in touch with what your photography involves. What makes photography and what makes great pictures. These things can make great pictures. They can make fantastic images. They have all through history. These things date back now nearly 100 years. But if you enjoy this video, give me a like. Maybe drop a subscription and mention something in the comments section. What do you think about rangefinder cameras from 70 years ago? Are you up to the challenge? Are you looking for a challenge? You thirst and hunger to take on the adventure of you being the ultimate determinant of how your photographs come out, or do you just take snapshots? A lot of things to think about. I hope you found this helpful, and drop me a line. Let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. This is Mr. Gibson Guy, and I'm out of here.